What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The Defense Ministry says this year's Kuang exercises will focus on coordination between local authorities and the central government. Taiwan's largest annual military exercises will last 10 days, longer than in previous years. Defense officials say a simulated air raid on an urban area will take place during the final 4 days from July 15th to 18th. People on the street will be expected to seek shelter when air raid sirens sound. The drill is part of a new program called Urban Resilience. Many Chinese spouses in Taiwan now face an uncertain future after a deadline to provide critical immigration documentation passed. While most of the thousands who live here complied with the order, about a sixth are still unaccounted for. Kuang has more.
In April, Taiwan's government informed over 12,000 Chinese citizens living in Taiwan and their children that they'd have to prove they've renounced their household registration in China. That deadline for them to do so has now passed, and those who failed to comply could face losing their legal status in Taiwan. These people, who are married to Taiwanese citizens, had until June 30th to submit the required documents. The latest numbers from last week show over 5,500 people have successfully submitted the proof. Another 2,500 either signed an affidavit or received extensions. More than 1,800 people are confirmed to be living abroad and will not need to submit the documents until they return. But the government has not been able to reach the rest, over 2,000 people. Officials say they may not be aware of the deadline, possibly because they live in remote areas or do not have access to a phone. Efforts are still being made to contact them.
基本上，目前为止还没有联系到的2000名的陆配的部分，只要他展现出这个他愿意去处理的意愿跟行动，那对于注销户籍这种重大的事件，我们不会尽予去做处理，我们会穷尽一切的方式，包括透过所谓的健保资料的勾稽，或者是说国安单位的一个协寻，我们会尽量把它找出来。
Over the past few months, the government's announcement has sent many scrambling, causing panic and confusion, especially among those who have reportedly lived in Taiwan for decades without issue. The government has stood by its decision, but also made moves to help, setting up in-person briefings and hotlines for Chinese citizens. They've also offered extensions and exceptions for Chinese spouses who have had legitimate difficulties in getting the required documents. They also clarified that this requirement is not new and has been in place since 2004, but many cases have fallen through the cracks. To be able to settle in Taiwan and get a Taiwanese national ID card, which affords them all the rights of a citizen, Chinese nationals are always required to give up their household registration in China and register instead in Taiwan. Household registration, a system used in both Taiwan and China, links a person's legal rights to a physical address, but is not the same as citizenship. Under Taiwan's laws, Chinese people are considered neither foreigners nor citizens, so they can obtain a Taiwanese ID by switching their household registration. This is unlike other foreigners, most of whom must give up their original citizenship. One day past the deadline, officials have not yet released the final numbers for how many Chinese spouses submitted their documents on time. And it's also not clear what they will do about people who failed to comply and what the future holds for them. Patrick Chen and Cadence Karanta for TaiwanPlus.
2 Taiwanese nationals face charges in the U.S. for helping North Koreans get remote jobs in more than 100 companies. The U.S. Justice Department also charged 6 Chinese nationals and 1 U.S. citizen in the scheme. Authorities say the group used stolen identities to help North Koreans earn remote salaries from Fortune 500 firms, funneling as much as $5 million into Pyongyang's weapons programs. As of broadcast time, Taiwan's government has yet to comment. Foreign ministers from the Quad group of countries have arrived for a meeting in Washington, D.C. Officials from Australia, India, and Japan will meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They're set to discuss security issues in the Indo-Pacific, including China's growing presence in the region. But the talks could be overshadowed by trade issues and other disagreements as the U.S. pressures its partners to increase defense spending. It's Rubio's second time meeting with his counterparts from the Quad. In January, the group agreed to meet regularly to prepare for a leaders' summit in India expected later this year. Thailand's prime minister has been suspended from office while the country's constitutional court deliberates on a case that could end in her dismissal. The case was brought by a group of Thai senators who accused Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra of breaching ethical standards. That's after a leaked phone call between her and Cambodia's de facto leader about border tensions caught public attention. In the call, she appeared to be trying to appease Hun Sen and criticizing Thailand's own military. The call has sparked widespread anger in the country and calls for her to resign. It's been 28 years since Hong Kong was handed over to China, the start of a slow erosion of freedoms in the territory. Some with pro-democracy leanings say even after all this time, Hong Kong's government is still finding new ways to make their lives difficult. John Van Trieste has the story.
Stuck on the front door of the Hunter bookshop in Hong Kong is a sign that reads freedom. For the shop's owner, it's more of a wish than a reality, as Hong Kong enters its 28th year under Chinese administration. Letitia Wong was a pro-democracy politician in the days before mass arrests wiped Hong Kong's democracy movement out. Wong stayed put in Hong Kong, reinventing herself as a bookseller. But even with her political career behind her, she says the government still has her on its radar. By her account, she's had more than 90 interactions with the authorities since summer 2022. Warning letters, fire and health code inspections, even patrols outside her door. Though a national security law, or NSL, passed last year cracks down on acts of overt dissent, she says there's a vague sense that everyone has to watch their back.
I think Hong Kong people are now scared of unknown, which we are facing a new normal, a new Hong Kong that with many regulations, many ambiguous red lines, and many self-censoring things.
The fire department says it was just following up on complaints. But Wong sees the inspections and paperwork as a subtle way of intimidating someone with a pro-democracy past. She's not alone. Another former politician, Chan Kim Kam, has gone from council representative to a seller of incense and fragrant oils. She says her tiny stall is also a target of this new kind of bureaucratic harassment.
Over the past 5 years, I feel that the space for me is reducing. I feel that people like informing the authorities all the time. It's rather irrational and abnormal. It affects my life because people inform the authorities and send complaint letters about my store and my works.
This isn't the Hong Kong many hoped for at its handover 28 years ago, the day the UK returned the territory to China after controlling it for over a century. China gained back a territory whose loss was a deep historical trauma, and for Hong Kongers, it was supposed to be business as usual. Things wouldn't change too much too fast. For 50 years, China was supposed to be one country with two systems, leaving the freewheeling liberal system that had grown up in Hong Kong intact for years to come. But as early as 2003, a planned anti-subversion bill showed Beijing might not be quite so hands-off as some in Hong Kong expected. Now, after a major crackdown in 2019 and 2020, Beijing's allies are firmly in charge of the territory, with democracy leaders exiled, jailed, or gone silent. Hong Kong officials say the average person has nothing to worry about running into trouble with the law.
When we promulgated the Hong Kong National Security Law, we make it very clear that the law is aiming at only a small portion of people who endangers national security.
But some are still uneasy about their futures, even if the pressure they feel comes from municipal offices, not the police. Chinese and Hong Kong flags flutter side by side through the city, marking the handover anniversary. It's clear those in charge are determined the one country part of the formula, adopted 28 years ago, holds. How well the rest of the arrangement's holding up depends on who you ask. Scott Kuang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
What does the Dalai Lama mean to people around the world? A special exhibit in Taipei ahead of the spiritual leader's birthday aims to examine his impact on human rights in Tibet and beyond. Tiffany Wong has more.
Here in Taipei, Friends of Tibet are sharing the practices of Tibetan Buddhism at a special exhibit ahead of the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday. Organized by the Human Rights Network for Tibet and Taiwan, the week-long display aims to walk visitors through the history of Tibet and the Dalai Lama's significance as a spiritual leader and as a leader in human rights advocacy. The spiritual leader has been living in exile in India after the Tibetan uprising in 1959 following threats from China. Beijing has put pressure on the Dalai Lama to recognize China's sovereignty over Tibet and Taiwan, which the Tibetan government in exile has rejected.
西藏里面的 reality 就是正殿的情况，你在西藏看不到，但是在民主国家上你可以看到很多。所以我们觉得台湾这个土地跟我们今天办的这个活动是非常，因为跟中文跟华语的关系来讲，非常有特别有帮助。
The Dalai Lama has visited Taiwan 3 times, even meeting with former presidents Li Denghui and Chen Shui-bian. While his last visit was over a decade ago in 2009, he still praised Taiwan's commitment to democracy when congratulating President Lai Ching-te on taking office last year. The exhibit aims to put the practices of Tibetan Buddhism that are taboo in China front and center, like placing the Dalai Lama's image on altars. It also includes artworks inspired by the Dalai Lama's advocacy for Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Uyghurs, marking his decades-long impact around the world. Klein Wang and Tiffany Wang in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taipei's Banga Park, a longtime gathering place for the city's homeless people, has been fenced off for renewal. The city says temporary shelters are available, but many unhoused residents say they're unsure of what comes next. Irene Ling has the story.
Once a bustling public center, now fenced off. This is Banga Park in Taipei's Wanhua district, a hub and unofficial shelter for many who are between jobs or unable to find a roof over their heads. It's been closed for renewal as the city looks to attract more tourists. Mr. Chen is one of the park's long-term residents. He says unhoused people from all over the country gather here for free supplies and a bit of kindness.
是在这边的人的话，大部分都是有一些善心人士提供一些资源、一些物资，然后这边的话就是有政府在社会局各单位在补助。
But as construction begins, local NGOs fear its residents will have no choice but to seek shelter on nearby streets.
他们大概就是会，比较是往公园的四周，就是自然流动，就是可能会是附近的店家骑楼，然后有的会到万华火车站，所以其实大概就是可能和平西路、广州街一带。
The Taipei city government has been working to refer park residents to shelters in other districts, but it is unclear how long they can stay and what their options are after that.
基本上我们来讲安置的话，基本上是希望他去中途之家，或者是进到长期的安置机构。 那我们的中途之家基本上，我们后续还是会转介回到户籍地。那基本上就是希望他回到原来户籍地的县市政府，可以得到比较好的照顾。
For senior park residents like Mr. Chen, what they hope for is a shot at employment and stability, to have a stable income and meals to look forward to, and to be able to take care of themselves.
只要身体健康能动的话，能做，就是社会上要给这些 高龄的人能有一个工作的机会。
Official figures from 2023 put Taipei's homeless population at around 650, but the real number is likely much higher. Now, with a vital resource closing and government support limited, life is about to get even tougher for one of society's most vulnerable groups. Kama Xu and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow us on social media for more of our stories. Before we go, we'll leave you with images of Paraguay unveiling its new aircraft that will be used to fight crime and drug trafficking. I'm Yvonne Young. Take care, and I'll see you next time.